Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Are you having as much fun as I am? I mean, what, what an unbelievable ensemble, at least from this morning. Justin's great talk. It's been a thrill so far, and frankly, I'm thrilled right now to talk to you about my passion. Sort of this is the reason I live. This is what I live for. So my story is that I'm an Army infectious diseases physician. I loved how Jeff phrased it this morning. I had a rich uncle, so my rich uncle paid for me to go to school, and I had a long obligation. But I'm still in the uniform right now. And the reason is very simple. I want to take care of soldiers. And soldiers get sick, and I want to prevent that. And that's on a very personal, take care of the patient standpoint, but from a global standpoint, I want to prevent all soldiers from getting sick, right? And I want to cure their infectious diseases. And that translates across to the US population and global population. That's what I care about. That's what I dream about at night. That's what I live for. Okay, and so, and a year and a half ago, I got the call to come to DARPA, and again, another thrill. And so my DARPA story actually, DARPA changed me, and hopefully in a good way, but DARPA changed me. So the leadership says, every day you walk in there, the leadership says, how are you changing the world? How are you being more creative? How are you exceeding the state of the art? And how are you being kind of crazy or coming up with the ideas that no one else is going to come up with? One of our litmus tests is if we say something, and then if people say, well, that's crazy, you can't do that. It's like, good, all right, I'm on the right track. And the standard is, you got to invent the internet. We've heard about that all day today. I mean, if you don't invent the internet, you get a B, okay? so it's a very high standard. And I love that. But the point is, they forced me to think about infectious diseases very differently. And furthermore, the privilege of DARPA is that we get to talk to people like you. We get to learn from you. We get to learn from the best and the brightest that our nation and sometimes that our world has to offer. And that's completely changed my thinking about infectious diseases. And so, the title of my talk is, it's about the host, not the pathogen. See, my whole career has been about, okay, this is the pathogen. We got to figure out we got to come up with the drug to treat it, and then we move on, and that's going to cure the sick, right? But I'm going to invite you in this talk to think about that whole relationship and how we approach infectious diseases differently. That's the path that I want to take, at least for the remaining time that I'm at DARPA and probably afterwards as well. Further in this talk, full disclosure right now, this is a recruiting pitch. And I have approximately 11 minutes left to recruit you to help solve infectious diseases problems, okay? And I'm thrilled to do so. I'm thrilled at this chance because of the tremendous talent that's in this room. And I have great colleagues who've inspired me in my DARPA journey so far that are here right now. Thank you to them. But I'm talking to the people that haven't really thought about infectious diseases much before, and I want you to help me solve problems. I'm going to try to entice you by telling you why these really matter, and then I'm actually, hopefully at the end, going to give you a chance to dig in and move out. Okay? And so, and the fundamental question that I want you to think about for the rest of this talk that I'll pose to you is simple. Why do some people get sick and other people don't when they're exposed to a pathogen? So start with a little bit of history. This is London, 1854. This is a map of cholera deaths and then where the pumps are located. You probably know this story, most of you. This is Jon Snow and the advent of modern epidemiology with outbreak investigation. And the story is waterborne source, remove the handle on the pump, and the outbreak goes away. But there's also an underlying message that's not told in this narrative, and that is a lot of people drank the water. And some people died, some people got severely ill, some people were asymptomatic. Why is that? So on a personal note, this is my very little Jon Snow moment in my career, is that I actually had a huge privilege to work with public health experts in the Republic of Georgia, the country, not the state, and participated in an outbreak investigation in the mountains. And so a beautiful country, of course, in the Caucasus, and beautiful mountains, and that's in the first picture there. This village actually also had a waterborne infectious diseases outbreak. In this case, it was tularemia was the infection, and it was essentially a dead animal contaminating the water supply. So stop drinking the water, okay, the outbreak slowly ends. But what I'm showing you on the far end picture there is actually big, large, tender, swollen lymph nodes in the neck. And the question when we went up there and saw all these patients was, why do some people have lymph nodes? Why do some people have a sore throat? Why do some people have no symptoms at all? But we all drank the water. And you know what we concluded? We had no idea. No, I mean, really, we have no idea. This was a few years ago, too, and I still have no idea. I mean, so, but that's what usually happens for us infectious diseases people. It's like we can't explain that. We can't explain that. And so if that doesn't entice you at least to think about this problem a little bit more, I mean, so you go through this too, right? I mean, I think this room has been fairly cough-free. I've sort of been watching so far, but you know the experience though. You're sitting at the table, you don't know the person, and they're sniffling and all this other stuff. But if not here, and on the plane flight, so on my plane flight, and it always happens, the person sitting behind you, halfway through the flight starts sneezing and it's going everywhere, and you're sitting there, right? Can't go anywhere else. And you're saying, am I going to go down or not? And you're thinking about your weekend plans, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this because I'm going to be in bed. Right? But why do you sometimes get sick and other times you don't? And it's a very complex answer to this. It's not an easy solution. But let's solve that problem. Because what I will postulate is if we solve that problem, we will not only be able to cure infectious diseases, but I bet we can translate that discovery into widespread applications in human health. Okay? And so when we start on this, I don't want to get into like the specific pathway on this virus or this bacteria. Again, think about the whole problem differently. Because right now in infectious diseases, we think about this as the pathogen's bad and we got to kill it. I mean, it's like a battlefield analogy. And so, and I put this up here because that's how we're taught in elementary school, right? Learn about the immune system. Here's the bad flu bug, and it's a decent picture, right? I mean, but that's bad, so we got to kill it, right? And so if you think about infectious diseases that way, then you're going to say we need to come up with better weapons to kill the bad bug, right? Antibiotics. Antibiotics have really changed the human condition. We talk about revolutions. I mean, it's made a huge difference. But there are also limitations to that, right? And Alicia touched on this morning with, some people now are declaring this post-antibiotic era. We're running into these untreatable infections. I think this is some of the unintended consequences of that approach. And on a personal note, again, this is just a quick anecdote about a multi-drug-resistant pathogen called Acinetobacter. And the tragedy of Acinetobacter is that when our soldiers get wounded on the battlefield, and there are guys out there up front like Jeff Ling who take care of them, and there are surgeons out there who truly save their lives. And we bring them back to the United States. And part of the way that we've treated them is broad spectrum antibiotics for a prolonged period of time. Well, the problem is then we select for bacteria that are resistant to all those antibiotics. And so now these soldiers are infected with these multi-drug resistant bugs and get into all sorts of complications. So let's think about the problem differently. Okay? I think we need a new approach. And this is more, take a step back. Okay? Host-pathogen relationship. And really, what I want to do is I want to focus on the host for the next few years that I'm at DARPA. Okay? I didn't invent this new idea, right? And this is a Nature article. Read the quote, it's a great one. And it's illustrating, I think, a movement in our community to really to look at the host relationships. I mean, Justin talked about symbiosis. In other fields of biology, they understand this very well. I think in infectious diseases medicine, we're coming around to this now. That we really want to focus on the host. Now, when we focus on the host, I don't mean that esoterically. I want to treat patients better, okay? And so the dream, the big DARPA vision, the wouldn't it be great, is that if we could take a situation where there's a host reaction that's doing more harm than good. For the medical types, think of septic shock as a great example. But these, for everybody, this is you get infected, and the problem isn't the bug's gone now, it's that host response. And that's what if we could modulate that? What if we could temper it? Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And then, wouldn't it be great is if we could then have some type of closed loop feedback where we sense kind of where that host response is in the equation, and then we could sort of modulate you so that your response is perfect, okay? That's the vision. Okay, now here's the big slide. Here's the sketch. I don't even have a sketch of this. You know, this morning you guys had, Phil gave this great talk about the cortical modem, and that was awesome. He had a sketch, right? I can't even sketch this because we're like decades away. This is crazy. You talk to the doctors in the room, they're like, we don't even know what to look for. The two fundamental problems is that we don't even know what to sense yet. We don't know what a bad host response looked like, and we don't have the tools to even characterize that. But even after we found that, we don't know how we would modulate that. We don't know even what right looks like for a given pathogen or when you're in septic shock or anything like that. And so the best I could do, I give you a pacemaker and an insulin pump. I mean, in medicine, we have some rudimentary, I shouldn't say rudimentary, these are good tools. We have concepts of closed loop feedback where we can modulate physiologic responses. Cool, good. But my point is, we have so far to go on this. We have a long way to go, and that's why I need your help. Okay. So what I suggest we do is let's take a step back, relook at the whole problem, and hopefully achieve a fundamental understanding. Okay, a fundamental understanding of what an appropriate host response should be, a survival type of response, and find that. And let me propose kind of two places where we can look for this. Okay, so we'll put them in these two categories: intraspecies and interspecies variation. So nature has given us the opportunity where not every person or not every species responds to the infection in the same way. That's where I want to look. Okay, and so that's what I'm depicting up here. Host fitness, think of, are you getting sick or not? Are you going to survive or not? And on the other axis is the pathogen burden. And so the point of this is that, again, we know the point I made at the beginning. Some people get sick, other people don't when they're exposed. Some people tolerate levels of virus or bacteria, other people don't. Okay, let's look for that variation and figure out the people that do well, what's the secret code, right? But more so, and what I show on this graph is that there are differences between species. Like we know that, for example, let's use gram-negative bacteremia as an example, that for certain species, like mice, they can tolerate a pretty significant amount of bacteria, okay? And that amount of bacteria in our blood would kill us. So in that case, and that's for this graph, we have mice at the top. So the mice have something figured out. What is it? What's unique about the mouse host response to that infection? Well, I don't know. But that's the fun part, right? That's where we're going to look. That's my point on where I want you to come with me and where we're going to try to find that. Because ultimately what we want to do, at least temporarily, if you're severely ill and the mice have it figured out, is maybe we need to make you more mouse-like to save your life. Again, we don't usually say you should be mousy, certainly not at DARPA. But for this, that may be the secret ingredient that will save you. So the phrase that we're using now for this idea to find that secret code, if you will, that leads you to survive or leads you to do well where others don't is outliers. So who are, and again, I'll take you back to this human analogy. Who are those people that when they're exposed to a given infection, they don't get sick? And again, are there people that if they're exposed to multiple different types of infections, they never get sick? Let's look for those. And what I want you to do, let's do this. Why don't we rally around a challenge and do this? DARPA, we love challenges, okay? And frankly, I love the idea of finding at least some of you, maybe most of you in this audience, and challenging you to say, help me find those outliers and help me crack the code. So here's what I propose that we'll do for you. And we'll say, what information is already out there so that we can start this journey? Well, it turns out, some of you may know this, there are thousands of clinical trials that have been done already on infectious diseases, okay? Thousands. And most of those trials are designed in a certain way, right? They have an experimental group, we're gonna give you the drug, but a lot of them also have this control group where you get the placebo, right? And the trial is always focused on the intervention. Did it work or not? And you compare the two, right? What I want to do is I want to go back and look at that placebo group, because in any given clinical trial, and the clinical research people in the room will tell you this, there's always people that don't get sick when they're supposed to, or they're supposed to end up in the ICU, but they did well, okay? So let's go back and look for them. You know, those are the outliers, and let's figure out what that secret code is. And the power that we have, which hasn't been done before in infectious diseases, is that it's not looking at one clinical trial. Imagine if we could look across hundreds of clinical trials. That's going to allow us to detect those rare events that we wouldn't see in one given trial. And what we also might find is a commonality between infections, that common pathway that helps you survive. So let's do this. So what we're going to do, is we're going to essentially set the table for you, okay? And we're going to invite you over for dinner. And on the table, we're going to put as many clinical trials as we can get our hands on in the next 3 to 4 months, okay? That's going to be, and you come over for dinner. Now, I'm okay if we kind of do this as a potluck, and if you bring a bottle of wine or something. So if you know of data that's out there, let us know, you know, and bring that to the table as well, because the more information we have, again, from disparate sources, I think the more likely we are to find something, okay? But then when you come over for dinner, again, we're going to have good food, but we need you to do the dinner conversation and teach us something that we never thought of before, okay? I'm stuck in an infectious diseases paradigm. I'm like, oh yeah, I know what works and what doesn't, but I really don't. You, especially if you have a fresh perspective on this, you can surprise us. And then when you find that surprise, then we'll take it and we'll run with it and we'll cure patients. This idea of all of this challenge idea, in the infectious diseases world, we don't have a lot of examples of this. Our colleagues in oncology, they've been doing this for a while. Large data sets. Combine them together, set the dinner table, invite people over, have them analyze it, and find unique aspects of certain part, of breast cancer or colorectal cancer that can ultimately lead to personalized treatment. They're better at it than we are, okay? But we're going to catch up, okay? And the way we're going to catch up is we're going to collaborate with them. So immediately following me is Dr. Stephen Friend. If you haven't seen it yet, look at his bio. It's really cool. And he's appropriately named Dr. Stephen Friend because he is a great guy. And in our community, you talk to people like, what I found is, do you know him? Do you know him? Everybody seems to know him, and it's always that positive response. But what Stephen's going to talk to you about is this idea, okay, and how they've run challenges before to solve problems in oncology, especially for that unique kind of surprise solution that he's going to communicate to you. But right before Stephen comes up, let me just finish up with this. It's a privilege to be here, and it's a privilege to work at DARPA. Really is. And maybe the best part is that our group and our leadership with Arthi and with Jeff and Alicia, they encourage me to be a little bit crazy and to really have the audacity to say, we're going to sort this out. We're going to answer that question that no one has answered before. Okay? We're going to do that. I'm saying it right now in front of you. We're going to do that. And then what Jeff's going to say to me is, well, when? And so then I'm going to have to respond. You saw as revolutionizing prosthetics. I'm going to have to respond 2 years. So we're going to solve this problem in 2 years. And I can say that, and that's the fun part about being at DARPA. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.